So this is another episode of Hiring Data Talks. Today I'm sitting with Wijnand Karsens. He started website developing almost 20 years ago. Then you developed more as a software developer and you made games. I also read that your
Yeah,
goals for this year are to organize a villa in Bali for AI hackers and entrepreneurs, make an
that's
AI
correct.
clone of yourself, and make ChatGPT accessible for many more businesses around the world. So
Yep.
before we get into that, the subject for today is to talk about ChatGPT and what we can do with it. But let's start with your goals for this year. Can you tell me a little bit why you chose them and if
Yeah. So at the end of last year, end of 2022, of course, ChatGPT came out, and that changed a lot in my direction because I was already working on a framework, kind of for software development. But then I saw that this thing is so transformational in the AI industry. I thought that yeah, it would be a good moment to start with AI because of course I have a background in AI, but I've never really been all in on it, and that's why I chose 2023 is going to be my year of AI. That I will really go all in on that. Um, and also, so the villa in Bali, we're trying to organize that because we want to bring a group of people together that also like AI as much as I do, and the others we organize it with. And yeah, so and the last one, the clone, well, that's probably more a bit long term, but maybe I'll get something at by the end of this year that will look like a little bit like me, like a chatbot that talks like me. That will be cool. And of course, if you can make a chatbot that talks like me, then I can make a chatbot that talks like anyone, as long as you have enough data. So that's I think a very interesting application.
we talked already before and you talked about Gen AI. I
Yeah,
think ChatGPT is a part of this. Can you tell me a little bit about what is Gen AI and how is this going to change everything?
yeah. So Gen AI or generative AI is kind of a new buzzword. I feel that a lot of people are using, and it kind of means that there's a lot of AI models now that can not only classify, like the models that have been there for the last decades, but can also generate new things in a creative way. So this is kind of new. It has been there for a while, but it is really getting good now. And among other things, you have of course GPTs like ChatGPT and GPT-3. Those are large language models, but you also have other transformers. For example, um, speech or text to speech. That's also kind of a generative model, I would say, and also text to image. For example, stable diffusion. You can also generate images with that based on a text input.
And how is this going to change our way of living?
I feel that that actually Gen AI is maybe still only a small part of the bigger AI landscape that's developing now. And I prefer more the word transformer AI, I would say, because you're actually transforming a piece of information into something else. And it can do so in a very creative way, and it can create new things. So I think it's going to change a lot because previously we would have needed to do that manually by like cognitive work. Like by, for example, if you want to make some art, you have to really put your brush in the paint for hours and hours. And if you want to write a blog, you would really need to write every letter of it. But now with generative AI, it can make our lives much more efficient if you know how to use it.
So everybody will get like a personal assistant.
Well, that's probably going to happen in the coming years, and I think there's already some examples there are already companies working on that. But in the beginning, I think there will be small mundane tasks that can be automated more and more. But in the long run, these systems will become more and more autonomous and will really understand us better also. And that's where the large language models come in, like ChatGPT.
So in what ways do you think that ChatGPT 3 allows for greater innovation in your projects?
Well, the way we are using GPT GPT-3, for example, but also ChatGPT, is we're doing programmatic knowledge transformation, is what I call it. So it is not just a chatbot where you have input and output, and where the human has to fill in a question or fill in a prompt every time and then get a result.
Mm-hmm.
But instead, we are using it in a programmatic way, where you would combine the thing that you input automatically with some context from the user. So you would gather, for example, a set of documents. Maybe, for example, you have some audio recordings that you transcribed about meetings, or maybe even podcasts, for example. That's a cool example as well, I think. And then you would be able to programmatically transform those things, those knowledge, those podcasts, right? They are knowledge, and you would transform them into something better, automated in an automatic way. And that's how we are using GPT-3 now, and also ChatGPT. And I think it's a really interesting way to make programs now.
So for ChatGPT could help, or GPT-3 could help this podcast by automating it with subtitles and also making a transcript and maybe turning it even into a newsletter or in posts in LinkedIn, or cut it up. Would it even be able to edit it?
Maybe even that. There's already a lot of startups working on that kind of things. And I think a podcast is one of the most interesting ways to actually communicate knowledge with each other, because you're actually having a long form conversation, right, about some intellectual topic. And I think that that's a really good source for creating more things like short form content, like social media posts. And what I'm seeing now with our early results of experimenting with GPT-3 and ChatGPT is that from things like podcasts, you can create a lot more than just the podcast. You can, for example, get all the most a summary. You can get the most interesting things that were said. You can also turn it into a blog, because it's kind of spoken text, but you can turn it into professionally written text. There's a lot of transformations you can do on the transcript of a podcast.
Yeah, you see many people are using ChatGPT, and it also in the content that's being created right now, you sometimes recognize, oh, this is ChatGPT, because a lot of the times it's really nice, a nice flow of the conversation, but not in the total, it's not really that interesting to read. It doesn't give that much new insights. Do you see any limitations at this point?
There's definitely limitations, but the thing that you're saying, I think, about that it's maybe not that interesting, it is maybe because it mostly generates in the current way people are using it, because they give a very short prompt and they get a very long answer. But I think if you use it with your own context, with your own documents, for example, with your own podcast that you have talked about yourself for an hour, then you can get and then just do transformations. Then it's also not that detectable that it's ChatGPT, but it is also more your own. It's more your own content. So that I feel is more interesting, in my opinion, because I agree with you that that's kind of a limitation, that it's easy to detect. And there's also detectors now, by the way, that are able to detect large language models. But there's also some other limitations. Shall I go a bit into that, or?
Yeah. So what I'm understanding right now is individuals, basically, if they want to be using chat or AI as an assistant in the future, they need to have a lot of personal data. They need to have things they wrote, things they've made in videos, and the more they have, the better the assistant will work for them. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, depends on how you want to use it, but I definitely think it would be an advantage to have more data from yourself. And that's actually, I agree that I think that that's also a problem right now because a lot of people are using hundreds of different tools in order to spread their knowledge, but they're not keeping it themselves. In the beginning, like 20 years ago, when we all had Windows 95, everybody was using their own file system to store everything. But I think that has gone more into all these diverse tools, and it's harder to get everything together right now because it's all in different places in these cloud platforms.
Yeah, everything is fragmented. So do you have any tips on that part? How should you be owner of your own data?
Yeah, I am working on that a lot, and I am trying to now create a system to kind of do everything again with your file system, but still have all the advantages that all the cloud gives you. But of course, that system is not ready yet. But if you want to do, if you want to start collecting more of your own data, which I would totally 100% recommend, not maybe for this year, but maybe for 5 years down the road when it's all super good, or maybe already next year. Of course, you will have more and more benefit from having your own data. So if you want that, I would definitely recommend, for example, with meetings, to record as much as possible and store it on your own file system or somewhere
Right.
at one, as long as it is in one place. And also reducing the amount of different tools that you get that you're using is a very important one, I would say, because then it becomes easier to get it in one place. And then the last thing is that you look a bit better at the tools that you're using, and also look at if they create a lock-in. So do they actually allow you to export your data, or do they want to keep it for themselves? Because if they only want to keep it for themselves, and they don't allow you to download or export or maybe integrate with an API, then it is just much harder to get it for yourself later.
So you have been working on a lot of projects. One you mentioned in another conversation that we had was Clarity. Can you tell me some of the interesting things you are building, for example, on ChatGPT?
Yeah, definitely. So I think the most. I've written down three of them. So I think we are working on a lot of different things at the same time because we're still very much exploring the capabilities of these new models. But the one of I think is quite interesting is making it more more efficient to communicate with things like LinkedIn and email. So we're using GPT to help you write better responses to emails and messages,
Right,
using
because
your own
already right now
context, for example.
you see people that they copy paste the text that they got from an email and then they put it in ChatGPT and say, write me an email. But you're saying you can integrate that in your email tooling.
Exactly. Yeah, there are already some tools that can do that. I think, for example, tryelly.com is a good example. That's a small AI tool that I believe is still in beta, but they make it completely integrated with your email. So you just have to click a couple buttons, and you get a response. And what we are trying to do is the same like that, but for LinkedIn.
Because you have
And also
currently
a bit
the standard
more
messages, thanks, hello, goodbye. But now you want to really
exactly,
have it go much deeper, and then it will read all of
much
your
deeper.
chat. So it will read your messages that you send to other people as well, and the current
It could,
conversation.
yeah.
Okay, and then it will make a perfect response.
It could do that completely autonomously if you want, based on the chat history. But if you want, you can also, of course, if you have a very specific piece of information that you want to be saying to that person, maybe you want to add a couple details, and then you can say generate response based on that. And I feel that that is probably the best way because you don't want to let the AI do everything for you yet.
Yes, then everybody's having conversations with the computer.
Yeah,
And maybe it's just
I
computers
don't like
talking to
that future
computers.
that much. Yeah, exactly.
And we will see the outcome.
why would you do that? Yeah.
Managers can just say
Yeah.
ignore all recruiters. Just say send it a nice message back, hey recruiter, at this point I'm not interested. Well, it can be a good way to reply. And then at the moment that they actually
Yeah,
do need recruiters, that they say, yes, hey, I'm interested.
yeah, maybe it's better than completely ignoring. If you get too many messages, for example, then maybe a nice message immediately would be better, right?
I
Then
think
at
so.
least, yeah, then
So so
hopefully
you,
it will improve it. But like you said, like maybe in the future where computers will be talking to computers all the time and you don't even know what's going on, I don't think that would be that nice.
no, so how, you told me about that LinkedIn, but you also have other tools that
Yeah,
you're building. You had three.
yeah. So the other one is we are trying to analyze audio. So mostly, for example, calls, podcasts, meetings, and trying to turn that into different formats. So do programmatic knowledge transformation on those things, because I feel that those are very valuable pieces of like source knowledge, and we are now looking at how to do that. Um,
What kind
and
of benefits could it have in the future? Why do
So
we
I
want
think
this?
that I think it will be possible to do much more with one very valuable conversation that you have with someone. So if you have a very intellectual, interesting conversation, normally it would be with one person, and we already share it now with the podcast. But if we are applying these tools, we can also share it, like you said in the beginning, in a blog post, and maybe we can make some social media content based on it, some videos, some LinkedIn posts, and for every platform you have a kind of a different format, but you're still saying the same thing, right? So
Yeah.
if you just transform it in a different format, then you can automate that, basically.
So you're basically saying that audio will be searchable.
That's also possible. Yeah, yeah. We are transcribing it, and the transcription is amazing. It especially in English, especially with high quality audio, it almost has no mistakes.
So the transcribing still goes to text, right?
Yeah, transcribing. So that's the first step, indeed. So you have an audio recording, you turn it into text, and that's the raw transcription. The
Okay.
only thing it changes from that is that it removes the and that kind of thing. So it improves it a little bit already. But after that, you would have a second step where you apply a GPT model on it in order to clean it up further.
Yeah, I can imagine that this is great for sales, for example, or for many other occupations where you call a lot. So for
Yeah,
sales, if all of my calls will be registered and notes would be automatically be made, that would be amazing. Like, because next time you will call and just, or you can even remember something you talked about and just search it, or ask ChatGPT,
yeah,
hey, can you look back?
definitely.
Who was that guy that I talked about planets or whatever you're talking about? And then it will find you that information. Right now, it's too.
Exactly. So yeah, we're still very limited now with videos because or audio, because now you would have to do a lot of steps in order to transcribe it and then search file by file, for example. But uh, I'm also working on the analyzing part. So you would have basically an AI. Maybe it will be done already this year a little bit, but maybe next year, where you could just ask a question to your own knowledge base. So you would have a would have you would have a Google for your own files, for your own knowledge and your own meetings, your own documents, everything. You can ask. It will work the same in a similar way than like ChatGPT does.
And how do you build stuff with GenAI?
So we are using full stack TypeScript as a programming language. And I think the most important consideration if you want to build things, for example, if you're a startup now that wants to do cool things with Gen AI or transformative AI, maybe, I think the most important choice you have to make is which models are you going to be using. And there's a lot of things you have to take into consideration to do that. But I feel like GPT-3 is a really good one right now, but it also depends a lot on your use case. You can also you should also probably make a choice. Do you want to use third-party APIs to do all the work, or do you want to run it on people's machine locally? because some of these models actually also run can run on your own infrastructure as a company. But now, for example, with GPT-3, you can only run it in the cloud with OpenAI and Azure later.
Yeah, that's decentralized versus centralized AI, and
Exactly.
I guess especially on privacy concerns that might be of interest.
It's a very important consideration indeed. Like if you have a use case where you want all the data, where you're working with sensitive data, then you want it to be more either on your own infrastructure or maybe even all the way down locally at the user's computer or server. Instead of having it all in the cloud. Yeah.
How do you envision GPT-3 evolving and improving in the future?
Well, GPT-3 by itself will probably not change a lot anymore, but of course the successors of it, for example, ChatGPT is a successor of GPT or GPT-3. That one will probably become available as an API. That's the first thing. It's probably going to happen in March, I believe. That oh no, sorry. So I'm not sure about when the API will be available of ChatGPT, but GPT-4 is likely to come out maybe in March or maybe April. And then, of course, the bigger these models get and the more trained they are on human feedback, the better answers they will be able to generate.
But why do we need these APIs? What is important about them?
Oh, the API is basically a way to make possible for programmers to use it in a programmatic way. So instead of having only the chatbot in the browser where you can send a request and you get a response with copy paste all the time, you would be able to make programs and applications with it. So that's super important. Yeah, and then I think the models will get bigger, but then also there's of course a lot of limitations of the current language models that we are seeing. So maybe I really think that these limitations also need to be tackled, because we can make them bigger, but these limitations will not go away by themselves by just making the models bigger. And the biggest limitation, I think, is the context size. So you cannot ask ChatGPT to answer a question about an entire book that you provided, because it's just too big of a request, and it doesn't really tend to work that well after about 3,000 words. Then the answers become worse. So that's a limitation that needs to be addressed. And then also there's also the limitation of, like, if you ask it a very complex question, usually it tends to perform worse as well. So it tends to perform better if you instead split up the prompt into chains of multiple prompts after each other. So that's also a limitation and potentially a solution to that limitation. And then also there's the limitation is that this language model doesn't really have a good memory. So it basically is trained one time, and then it can remember one conversation, but it doesn't create a context around you know. So that's a problem, because then...
Is that still also with the paid version that came out like this week?
I think so. It's definitely something that can improve upon a lot still, and that will probably take years to fully make it really good, you know. And that's a completely different thing than what they are doing now. They're just increasing the size, making it faster, making it more accessible. So I definitely think that it will be something that will take a lot of years to perfect. And then there's also the problem of hallucination. I don't know if you have noticed, but sometimes if you ask a very specific question about a very specific topic, it might give you an answer that it thinks it knows it, but it will just be something that isn't true, some bullshit basically. And that's called hallucination. So it will basically say something that it thinks it's true, but it's basically hallucinated, imagined. That's a big problem, and that's also at the core of how this architecture, how this technology works, and it's very hard to solve that.
So in the up and coming time, it will get better, of course. It will be more useful. It's already pretty useful. We will get more applications that are built on top of ChatGPT or on top of other big AIs that are out there, and that it will become more usable for us in our daily lives. What do you see, for example, for a recruiter? How would you see our lives improve?
Yeah, so like I mentioned in the beginning, I think the integration with LinkedIn is probably a really useful one for you, and also email, because you're communicating a lot, and but also analyzing meetings, right? So you have a lot of meetings, you have a lot of calls. So if you can do more with those things that you do, if you can make your time more valuable because you can produce more, and you can help people better because of it.
Yeah,
I think that will be a very big increase in how productive you can be with 8 hours in a day.
I can also see that a lot of the times you're sending an email to somebody and they don't respond, and you have to do a follow-up email, maybe even two. I don't think this is just for recruiters. This is for everybody. Project managers following up with their the people on their teams. Hey, how are you doing? Give me an update. And I think AI can help you in this part as well, like really tracking who
Yeah,
did respond, who didn't respond, and just tell
yeah,
tell the computer, hey, we want to have everybody who didn't respond. They need to get an email about this, and this. Get me updates, and then when they do get the updates, you want them automatically move to update it in your system, right? You want to,
exactly.
if you are a
Yeah,
project manager, you would like to have whatever tool you're using updated on the status. Hey, they're now on 60% instead of 50. I
yeah,
think
definitely.
this is one use for managers.
Yeah,
We will
yeah,
only
that can.
figure out in the next months and years what's possible, but as if we can think of it, it's probably possible.
Yes, I think so. As long as you split it up into, yeah, like a programmer always does, like split it up into smaller pieces and then solve every piece separately, and then you get it done.
So we need to all start working on bite-size coding and then just put everything together, and then we have a good solution. But do you see these companies competing with each other for market share, and how does that work? Because you are obviously a smaller entrepreneur. You do work a lot with other entrepreneurs, and you're
Yep.
hyped about this topic. You love it. You want to bring it further. You want to be part of it. How does that
Mhm.
work?
Yeah, so of course, I see it as a completely new landscape now. So I think if you're fast now, if you're quick to market, you can take a really big chunk, and that's what we're aiming for. Because it's a completely new technology that is potentially applicable to almost every industry.
And your focus right now is voice and ChatGPT. That's why you put it in your LinkedIn
Yep.
as your title. That's your focus
Yes,
area.
that's my focus area.
Yeah, that's like the movie Her, where everything is built on voice. We don't have
Yeah, yeah,
a
I love that movie.
yeah. That's the future for you. Just talk.
Yeah, yeah,
And
I would love to personally work more from nature and not so much behind a screen or in an office.
yeah,
And I think with if you can use voice to do productive work, then it's totally possible.
it's already tricky because I sometimes do voice messages, and then you have to put like a dot, and it doesn't really make the words that I want, and then I need to think about it,
Yeah.
and then sometimes I want to go back a phrase. How do you see this developing?
Well, that will definitely be solved. If you just put a large language model behind it and make it more professionally written instead of just spoken language, then it will totally be possible to to improve that and place the dots automatically.
Yeah, we do, because we're not used to like if you write an email, you can think about it, you can pause for a second, think about it, write it. But if you're talking, I was amazed by that in the movie Her. He was just saying his email, and he was making phrase by phrase so easily. I think it's maybe even training our mind to work in a different way, or that's the
Yep.
difference between speech and writing text, written text.
Yeah, of course. I think there's also advantages to having a text editor because you are able to look at it back and improve things before you send it. but it's not necessarily the only way. And I think, like you say, if you train your brain a bit on it, you will get better at it. But I also don't think it necessarily needs to be like in the movie Her. I don't think you need to say everything piece by piece perfectly in one time, because the ChatGPT, the large language models, can help you improve it afterwards, and that will maybe will be enough.
Yeah, did you mean this, or would you prefer this? And then,
yeah,
if we look back, let's say 30, 40 years from now to this moment, which things do you think are absolutely obsolete?
So what would be obsolete
What
40
are we
years
not
from
using? What is weird? Yeah, this is a question just popped in. What do you think? For example, I'm thinking maybe we're not using mouses and keyboards anymore.
Yeah, I think so. I think that those things are going away, but 40 years is a long time. I think potentially it can be, depends on what you want, and I think mouses and keyboards are very useful, and maybe they're still useful then, because you can quickly be very precise on what you want to do. But definitely will also be possible with voice, and maybe even integrating with the brain, like Neuralink, stuff like that.
Yeah, 40 years is a long time. If you think back, 40 years from, it was 93. Oh, no, 983. Sorry.
Yeah,
there was not even functional internet, no fast computers, no Windows.
Yeah, and now we're at the dawn of AI. So at least, yeah, that was then internet was invented in the 80s, and now, or in the 90s even, and now AI is really becoming big this year.
Interesting. Well, I always love to just think a little bit about the future. I want to thank you for your time. If people want to sign up for your villa in Bali, how do they do that?
You can go to codefrombali.com, and there will be some information there, and a button to, or an email to, yeah, a place where you can sign up.
And these kind of people need to be chill people who want to work in AI, code a little bit, not too serious.
Yes. Yeah, if you love AI like I do, and if you like to also have a good lifestyle around it, then you should come.
Good. I would like to thank you so much for your time. It was great having you here, and well, I'm sure we'll talk again in the future. Maybe we can do a follow-up podcast on a specific tool that you have been building and see the success of it.
Sounds good. Thank you.